If you're listening in the dark, get comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Tonight you wake up somewhere very precise. London, about the middle of the 19th century. The first thing you notice isn't what you see, it's what you're allowed to do. You open your eyes to cool air and coal smoke memory. A low fire has slumped into a tray of sleepy embers, the kind that whisper rather than glow. Your bed is narrow, iron, and honest. The mattress isn't modern foam. It's stuffed with horsehair that remembers your shape only out of politeness. The linen is clean but a little crisp. Beside you sits a small bell. You ring once. That's not just convenience, it's etiquette. In respectable homes, you don't stumble down the corridor in your night things. You ring. The sound says, "We are civilized here. We have roles. We will keep them." Footsteps, a soft knock. "Good morning, miss." Mary enters, already laced and buttoned and arranged. She moves like a secret. Her eyes flick to the grate, the curtains, the slant of light. She says, "Shall I draw?" You nod, and grey London filters in through soot-kissed glass. It is a washed-out daylight, thin as paper but determined. She sets a jug of hot water on the washstand. It plinks as it settles little notes of heat. The basin is porcelain and cold to the touch. You wash without splashing because a respectable young lady doesn't sound like a sturgeon trying to escape a bucket. Teeth. A little tooth powder on a brush with bristles stiff enough to renegotiate your gums. Face. No vigorous scrub. Delicacy. Is half the point. Modesty screen. Useful if another maid must enter. Even behind screens, there are rules within rules. You do not call to Mary while she is tending the fire. She does not speak to you while you are washing unless you speak. First, Mary lays out the underpinnings, a quick stack of decisions made for you. Chemise first, white and simple. Stockings, garters, stays, what you'd call a corset, but what Victorians call your figure's friend with a straight face. Mary threads the laces and draws. "A touch, miss." You inhale, then nod. She draws again, gentle, then firm, until your breath becomes a measured thing. It's not a comic book waist. It's a posture that tells the world you belong to a rhythm that is steadier than your lungs. Next. Petticoats, one for softness, one for shape, maybe another with cords that teach your skirt a bell curve. If you're listening for history, even the fabrics hum. Cotton whispering, linen sighing, silk muttering that it is entirely too good for mornings. The day dress comes last, blue to flatter the eyes, or brown to flatter the budget snug. The bodice, severe at the shoulders and honest about sleeves. Buttons climb your back like steps you'll never see. Hair drawn back and arranged without drama. A net, a comb, a few pins that will find your scalp later, just when you're trying to look serene. The mirror gives you a person designed for daylight, composed, precise, not 1 inch volunteered to chance. Perfume, not really. A whisper on a handkerchief, monoil or bergamot enough to smell clean, never enough to suggest that you are trying to attract anything except respect. Gloves, yes. Hands were practically private parts in polite company. Bare fingers belonged to intimacy, illness, or work. You thank Mary quietly. She's not your friend. She's your right hand you never show, a person trained to be invisible in a home built to be seen. Gratitude doesn't cross the line into familiarity. She curtsies. You glide downstairs. Breakfast waits not as a comfort, but as a ceremony. The dining room is bright with the discipline of polished things. Your father appears already armored in waistcoat and respectability. Your mother has an early stack of correspondence notes of condolence. Congratulations, acceptance, regret for winds of Victorian social weather. Everyone greets everyone without touching. You don't kiss cheeks. You don't collapse into chairs. You sit with a shape your governess once physically arranged with her hands. The way gardeners train vines, food arrives in courses of common sense. Porridge that warms, eggs that justify the day. Toast you butter without making a scene, butter the edge. Break a piece, butter that, eat it. Never butter a full slice, as if you were stuffing a suitcase. Tea pours like diplomacy, hot, capable, a little tannic if neglected. Coffee exists, but tea is the conversation. The newspaper rustles in deliberate columns. The clock keeps a public beat. Your knives make only the sounds that knives are allowed to make. Conversation is the art of saying something without saying anything. You do not bring emotion to the table like a pile of laundry. No talk of money. No religion beyond the sermon was edifying. Politics lives in clubs and newspapers. It does not sit beside the marmalade. You admire a neighbor's new carriage without counting the horses out loud. You inquire about Mrs. Hartley's health in terms that sound kind and reveal nothing. If someone has engaged themselves to someone else, you congratulate, you do not pry. Curiosity is energetic, and energetic is a little vulgar before noon. After breakfast, there is a small rain of cards at the hall table, visiting cards each the size of a tidy thought. Names in black ink, sometimes a tiny address, sometimes a pressing embossed like a fingertip in snow. Cards are the atoms of social life. Mary's counterpart below stairs sorts them into piles that look like stationery, but are actually geography, who you owe a call to, who owes you, who has signalled a farewell with PPC. Poor Prenda Conjay, who is in mourning which dictates your distances strictly as it dictates their wardrobe. Your mother glances at the mantel clock. 11 isn't for morning calls, of course. Those happen between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, because the 19th century enjoys the little joke of naming things to keep outsiders guessing. But 11 does mark preparation letters to write, errands to assign, gloves to clean, a bonnet, ribbon to decide upon, as if ribbons carry diplomacy in their threads. They kind of do. Before the world can examine you, your day examines you first. The drawing room is a stage where light performs on upholstery, and everybody pretends it's spontaneous. You take up needlework that is part artistry, part discipline, part alibi. No one can accuse idle hands of mischief if your hands are inventing roses for pillowcases. It's not that you must earn your bread. It's that you must earn your place. Industry is moral here, and morality has a very good memory. Between stitches you listen to the house. There is a symphony below, stairs, polish, chop, pump, scuttle. Etiquette for servants is as intricate as etiquette for their employers. A butler never treats a cook as a maid. A housemaid never addresses you unless addressed. And you, in turn, do not make a maid your confidant. Do not make the butler your messenger for anything that could be written. Do not make your preferences there. Emergency. If you are kind in quiet ways. A thank you that isn't theatrical. A pair of gloves mended rather than scolded over. A library book slipped to Mary with "You might like this one," said in a tone that tells her she is seen but not exposed. If you're tempted to laugh at all this, that's fair, but rules do a job here. They separate rooms that would otherwise collide. They tell whole streets who they are and who they aren't, who may come and go, and who must ask to be admitted. It's not a fair system, but it is a functioning one. And inside it, real kindness survives precisely because it's careful. At 2:45, yes. Early, you rehearse your afternoon body. Bonnet angled with intent, shawl as grammar, parasol as punctuation, gloves buttoned. You will go out in a way that reads correctly at a glance. London is watching, and London has opinions. With the last pin set, you draw a breath that is shorter than it was before your laces, but also steadier. It will do. Mary picks an invisible thread from your shoulder. You pick a bit of soot from your cuff. Outside, the street performs its regular miracle. The sound of iron on stone, the distant bell of a hansom, the cry of a seller with a basket full of something seasonal, the press of fog that always seems to remember last week better than today. You step toward the door the way a sentence steps toward its full stop, purposeful, neat, correct. The day hasn't judged you yet, but you are ready for it to try. And somewhere under the fabric and the formula, you're still you thinking thoughts. The rule book can't see. Asterisk. Welcome back. Another shoulder drop. Another quiet breath. The house has put on its afternoon face. Now you put on yours. Today is for morning calls that are not in the morning, which is a perfect Victorian joke delivered with a straight face. It begins in the hall. A silver tray sits on the console table like a small moon. On it, visiting cards, a neighborhood of names. Your own cards rest in a case the size of a palm. Heavy paper, black print, nothing fussy. This card is not a business card. It's a passport. You will present it to the butler of someone who may or may not be at home, and who may or may not wish to be. The butler will read it the way a librarian reads a title. He will note the family, the street, the ink, the neatness. He will announce you accordingly, or return with a message that is a sentence shaped like a cushion. Not at home, which might mean not at home, or might mean not to you. Don't take it personally, take it properly. If not, at home, you leave your card. If the lady is recently bereaved, your card arrives wrapped in the appropriate silence, perhaps in a plain envelope edged in black. If you are departing the city for a season, you write PPC on your card and leave a drift of farewells without requiring thanks. The tray fills with polite evidence of lives that meet by appointment. You and your mother depart at 10 minutes. Before 3, because arriving a little before the acceptable window is worse than arriving a little after. It hints that your time is underfurnished. The street is a narrow theatre. Gentlemen tip hats. Ladies nod without flashing teeth. Children are corralled by nannies whose starched aprons could stop a small cannonball. You don't rush, you proceed. Grace is measured in inches per second. At Mrs. Hartley's, the butler opens with an expression somewhere between sympathy and mathematics. You hand him 2 cards on a small tray, one for the lady of the house, one for her daughter. He vanishes, the way only a trained butler can, silently, quickly, decisively, and returns to invite you into the drawing room, which has been staged for your arrival whether you were expected or not. No one ever looks surprised in a drawing room. They look pleased, and then, if necessary, they remove the extra book from the chair you're invited to sit in, as if that book has nothing to do with them and everything to do with your comfort. Furniture in this room is placed like a map, 2 chairs angled for conversation, a sofa for moderation, a low table that holds exactly 1 vase and safe magazines. You sit on the edge, not like you've been ejected from orbit, but like you have more spine than upholstery. Skirts belled politely without dominating the floor. Gloves remain on unless tea is served and a cup forces a choice. You do not fidget. You hold a fan, even if you don't need one, because small objects give hands a task that isn't nervousness. The conversation is a dance without the strain of music. There are steps, and they matter. Begin with the weather, because the weather isn't anyone's fault, and everyone has survived it. Proceed to yesterday's sermon, which was uplifting, as sermons are required to be. Admire a hydrangea without triggering a dissertation. Congratulate the daughter on her recent engagement without asking, even by accident, to whom. Names are volunteered like championships. You must not referee. If you have news, leak it like a gentleman. You do not announce that you'll be at Lady Wilton's musicale. You express a hope that Mrs. Hartley has received an invitation. You do not say, "We've a new carriage," but accept, modestly, the compliments that follow the fact that you arrived in one. The conversation must look like it happened by accident. That is the essence of the afternoon call, a planned accident. Time is the strictest guest in the room. 15 minutes for an ordinary visit. Some houses keep a clock where the hostess can see, but the guest cannot. Your mother wears a watch. She doesn't consult it, she knows it. At the invisible quarter hour, she adjusts her gloves just enough to signal the pleasure is ours, but not forever. You rise. No one says, "Please stay." No one says, "Do hurry along." Everyone says what the ritual expects. So kind of you to call. So pleasant to see you. And they mean it, even if they also mean, we did it correctly, and correctness is an actual comfort. On the way out, you pass the hall table again. There's a humble art to that table. It is where the house keeps its social ledger. The butler knows who hasn't called in 6 months, and who calls too often. The corners of some cards are folded, which in certain circles signals exactly how the call was made in person, by a servant, by farewell. Not every family uses that code, but every butler reads it anyway, just in case. In a city as large as London, the whole table is how strangers become acquaintances, and how acquaintances decide whether to become friends. There are missteps you don't make. You do not sit without being asked. You do not bring your own topics. The way a peddler brings ribbons, spilling them and asking people to choose. You do not whisper across another guest. You do not whisper at all. You exist at a volume that respects wallpaper. You do not pull out knitting unless the hostess reaches first for hers and the room changes into a workroom by mutual consent. You do not stay to the 16th minute, because time is the furniture of a Victorian afternoon, and you never rearrange someone else's parlour. Sometimes you will call and be received and find yourself in a little social diorama to other ladies. You have a gentleman on best behaviour because he is visiting his aunt, a cousin who is trying to be surprised to see you while looking precisely as unsurprised as everyone else. The room becomes a gentle centrifuge in which people take turns at the centre, and then drift to the edges without losing composure. Conversation threads itself through weather, music, exhibitions, travel that was educational and never sensational, and charity that is effective and never self-congratulatory. Gossip exists, but it comes disguised as concern, and it never sits down. It passes through like a draft no one wishes to admit they can feel. You could be forgiven for thinking this is nothing. 15 minutes of velvet emptiness, but it's actually how the city breathes. Afternoon calls keep alliances oiled and opportunities visible. They remind neighbours who is ill, who is back from the country, who is quietly grieving and needs the right kind of silence delivered to their door. They are how young women appear in safe spaces where young men can see them and remember. Without saying so, who dances well, and who has a laugh that makes conversation seem as easy as breathing. And if you're a young man listening, your version has rules too. You call on the father first. You never arrive without a card. You keep your hat in your hand until invited to set it aside. And even then, you set it on your gloves, never directly on polished furniture. You ask after health. You do not compliment beauty. You compliment improvement, taste, cultivation. You speak to the mother slightly more than you speak to the daughter, because permission is half the courtship, and you never overstay. If you want to say more, you say it by coming again another day. Inside another 15 minutes, by 5 o'clock, the window closes. The streets gather their evening. Children are folded back into nurseries. Men fold back into clubs. Lamps are lit with a pole and a practiced flick. You return home with a modest harvest of social possibilities. Set your bonnet down where it won't crush its own ribbon, and exhale a day's worth of manners. The silver tray in your hall now contains cards that promise replies and cards that expect nothing. You don't need a diary to know what tomorrow looks like. A Victorian afternoon wrote it for you already, in legible ink, and yet once the door is closed and the gloves are unbuttoned, you feel it, a small, pleasant ache behind the ribs from holding yourself correctly for hours, the way a violin might. Hum a little after the bow stops. It isn't unhappiness. It's the sensation of being a person inside a system that it's best keeps. The peace by giving everyone something to do and a right way to do it. Tea arrives just as the street begins. To forget the day's names. You hold the cup, and the cup holds you. Asterisk. The evening begins long before the candles are actually lit. Dinner isn't a meal. It's a performance that begins in the wardrobe. You change again because you must. Day dresses know their place. Evening dresses know their audience. Your bodice dips slightly collarbone. Permissible drama, not the fabric acquires a sheen it didn't dare carry at noon. Jewelry appears the way stars do one at a time. Never a handful. You arrive at the host's door at the correct minute, which is not the earliest or the latest. A footman offers to take your cloak and takes, also, a snapshot of your rank from the fabric in his hands. You might think the butler announces your name. He actually announces your identity, which in that world is not quite the same thing. In the drawing room, people stand, they do not sit. Sitting implies you came for the food. You came for the company and the theatre of being publicly agreeable. The hostess arranges the pairing for dinner with delicate power. The highest-ranking gentleman takes her right. The highest-ranking lady takes the host's right. The rest of you are puzzle pieces that resolve the picture mercifully with a logic you're not expected to see. The procession to the dining room is graceful. A ribbon unrolling itself down a corridor taught by years of practice to become a kind of second ballroom. At the threshold, the table gleams like a pond at moonrise. Glassware multiples, silverware advances from the edges inward like regiments deployed for a campaign. You do not panic. Outside in, that is your map. Soup spoon. On the far right first, there will be soup. If there isn't, there will be something that wants to be soup. Napkins are lifted and placed quietly on laps. They are never flapped like celebratory flags. Grace is sometimes said, and sometimes is simply assumed. The first course arrives by person, not by platter service, a Laros, the modern method, one dish at a time. Each plate is its own event, with a beginning, a middle, and a dignified exit. You are not here to reveal appetite. Hunger exists, it just isn't invited. Small bites, chewed invisibly. Butter one bite at a time. Never build a buttered stage for future bread. Don't salt before tasting. You aren't correcting a chef. You're participating in the host's evening. If a dish confuses you, fish knives, for example, with their broad profiles and peculiar bluntness, copy the calmest person near you. There is always a person who looks like they were born at a table. Tonight you let them be your lighthouse. Conversation lives between the two people nearest to you. A crusty table talk is a bridge no one wishes to build. Ask gentle questions. Answer with 4 or 5 sentences that go places, then land. Topics are curated. New exhibitions, harmless travel, agreeable books. Politics is a sleeping dog. Money is a cat that hates to be touched. Religion is a cathedral you admire from the sidewalk. You're not being shallow. You're being safe. The room has its own weather. Candlelight steadies. Glass glows. The scent of soup retires for the scent of fish. Retreats for game. Gives way to something sweet that knows its signal. Courses are not simply tastes. They are handoffs. The staff moves around you with precision that lives below speech. Plates vanish when they ought. Fresh forks arrive like polite ideas. The best service makes you forget that service is labor. The best gratitude remembers it anyway. There are traps for the unwary, but most are sprung by anxiety. Don't fill silence with biography. Don't overpraise. It looks like you're auditioning. If someone at your elbow says something foolish, don't rescue them by contradicting them. Rescue them by adding a sentence that guides the topic gently toward a better shore. A Victorian dinner is a social waltz. You protect your partner from collisions without making a fuss about it at a certain moment after the sweets. Sometimes after fruit, the hostess will catch the eye of a senior lady and rise. Every woman in the room stands as one. The gentlemen stand, too, then sit again as the ladies drift back to the drawing room. This is not an insult. It's a convention. The men will have port and perhaps cigars and talk business or parliament, which the 19th century pretends is bad. For delicate lungs, the women get a half hour of something priceless. Relief, back in the drawing room, voices lower. Corsets have not loosed, but expressions do. Someone approaches the pianoforte and says something reckless like, "Won't you favor us?" You never say, "Yes, I long to perform." You say, "If you wish it," and you play something musical rather than martial. Mozart is safe. Mendelssohn is safer. Chopin is only safe if you have good wrists and a better poker face. Your hands deliver competence. Your face delivers modesty. The applause is polite, which is to say, enough, not too much, and perfectly. Placed .t follows as if it grew in the hearth. Someone will take sugar and pretend they shouldn't. Someone will say they mustn't and do so anyway. Conversation relaxes, but doesn't collapse. You may speak across the room now, if the room invites it. Laughter appears like a cameo and departs before it becomes an anecdote that requires names. In the corner, a young couple becomes a pair, because they are watched from just far enough away. Even affection has etiquette. It walks on a carpet of eyes. When the gentlemen return, they bring an atmosphere with them, a whisper of tobacco, a slight flush of port, the feeling that something with numbers was resolved. The room rebalances. Cards may appear whist, perhaps, or the evening may become a salon with short readings and shorter opinions. The trick of the social night is to find your place in its tide. Flow forward, recede, never splash. Departure is as choreographed as arrival. No one leaves first unless they are senior enough to do so without sending everyone else to their feet. 11 often serves as a natural ending, though earlier or later works depending on the household. You thank the host and hostess specifically. If you are very young, you thank the hostess twice, once with your words and once with your eyes. The hall returns your outdoor things. Your cloak knows your shoulders immediately. The night air is a brisk correction after the warmth. Home again, you remove the pins that made your hair perfect and your scalp patient. You breathe a little deeper. When the stays unlace, breath remembers the shape it prefers. Someone downstairs is still washing delicate glass that looks like it would prefer not to be touched by human hands at all. You bank the fire. The night becomes a private country where you may speak in your own accent. You think about the dinner. You said nothing remarkable, and that was exactly right. You looked at people when they spoke and let them be interesting. At safe speed. You rescued one awkward pause by remarking on a vase of ferns, not the arrangement. The species, and earned a thank you in the hostess's glance that no one but you saw. These are tiny victories. They add up to the reputation. That makes a life seem smooth. And if you are engaged well, then the rules multiply and soften at the same time. Gloves may be peeled back in the carriage on the way home and hands pressed together briefly, a secret that isn't a scandal. A ring winks when candlelight leaves the room. The future arrives in very small pieces. Even happiness is better when it follows instructions, or so the century insists. You slip into bed with the sound of iron wheels on stone still coasting through your head. The city exhales. So do you. Tomorrow has another ritual waiting, shops perhaps, or a stroll through Hyde Park, where even the speed at which you turn your head has a setting. But that is a problem for daylight. For now, you've kept your balance, in a room designed to test it, and that is a surprisingly peaceful way to sleep. Asterisk. Take another easy breath. Outside is not chaos. It's choreography with wheels. The city begins at your doorstep with a brass bell that has met more weather than you have. The pavement is a palette of damp stone and stubborn dirt, and the gutters are the kingdom of the crossings sweeper, boy or girl with a broom who makes you a dry path for a coin. You are expected to notice them, and also expected not to stare. Charity, yes. Spectacle, no. You tip with a gloved hand, small coin, small nod, small thank you, and move on with the same measured grace with which you move through rooms. London respects a person who travels as if they belong. Walking has rules. You keep to the left, because carriages keep to the left, and habits harden into law where wheels are involved. You do not dart. You indicate intention with pace and posture. When the pavement narrows, the gentleman takes the outer edge, the danger side, between you and the street, a human fender against splashes and elbows. If you're unescorted, you choose routes that are publicly respectable. Main streets by day, parks and promenades at proper hours, never alleys that advertise ignorance or bravado. Not because you are timid, but because reputation is an outer garment you wear before your cloak. Had speak a dialect all their own. Gentlemen lift them, never waggle them, and meeting an acquaintance. Ladies do not remove bonnets outdoors unless seated for a long while, and then only if the setting is informal enough to pretend the sky is a ceiling. You acknowledge greetings with your eyes and the smallest inclination of your head. You never fling words into the air for the sake of being heard. The city is loud. Your courtesy is not. Carriages are a language of budgets and days. There are the smart private brooms that say, Our family sat down with a coach builder and a vision. There are handsome cabs, two-wheeled, quick on turns, drivers upright as punctuation marks. There are four-wheeled growlers, sturdier, heavier, slower, intimate with rain. If you hail one, you do not shout. You raise an arm in a firm line and let the driver aim for your intention. Prices are negotiable in theory and fixed by personality in practice. You discuss your destination before your foot leaves the curb. You settle the fare without haggling to death the last impression you make. Omnibuses thunder past like opinions on stilts. They are democratic in the particular Victorian sense, a mix of clerks, shopkeepers, occasional gentry in a mood to save. Their horses, and people whose faces have more geography than you have maps for. You board at stops. You do not leap while moving. You allow a conductor to treat you as cargo with courtesy. Seats on top come with wind and view and soot. Seats inside come with breath and advertisements for soap that promise salvation in a tin. You will learn the routes the way you learned the rooms of your house, by intuition, and the names of corners. Street sellers cry their inventory in scales that never quite match the weather. Muffins, watercress, pins, lavender, evening papers. Hot pies you may buy. You must not bargain as if staging a victory. The victory, if any, is in remembering that every transaction is a conversation, and conversations overheard in the street become stories at dinner tables you may eventually visit. You practice the kind of politeness that leaves no rumour behind it. Hyde Park is an hour in a frame. Mourning belongs to riders. Rotten Row is a runway of manners on horseback. You nod to those you know. You do not know very many at first, and that is a virtue disguised as shyness. Afternoon belongs to walkers, nursemaids, perambulators, and waterfowl that never read anyone's rules. The Serpentine minds its own business and expects you to do the same. You may promenade on the Ladies' Mile in company. You may sit on a bench and pretend to be absorbed in a small book while noticing who bows to whom. Hyde Park is a stage where every entrance is also an exit. You learn the trick of seeming both present and provisional. Conversation in public has a volume and a temperature. You keep opinions wrapped like good silver. You remark on the weather because you recognize in it a neutral monarch. You discuss the newest exhibition at the Academy, the latest worthy subscription, the dog that insists on loving everyone. You do not discuss people who are near enough to hear their names. You do not laugh like an exclamation point. And yet you let yourself be delighted by small things. The precise bravery of a child who insists on feeding a swan. The sun deciding to exist for 15 full minutes. The feeling of moving through a city that believes itself to be the center of the century. There are places you do not go without company because the city declares its own borders. Some are simple, the docks at night, certain markets in certain weathers, certain theatres after certain hours. Others are social. A working-class public house is not for you, though a well-run hotel coffee room might be, if appropriately chaperoned. Your map is not only space, it is time. Streets are respectable at 2 in the afternoon that are stories at 10 at night. You respect that difference because you prefer your stories to be drafted indoors. Umbrellas are behavior on a stick. You carry one if clouds resemble policy. You hold it high enough not to rearrange the hats of strangers. You tilt it in doorways so that water doesn't turn thresholds into brooks. If a gust flips it inside out, you do not fight it like an enemy. You lower it, laugh quietly, and let physics apologize by cooperating on the second try. A gentleman may offer his umbrella. A lady may accept, and both will then walk closer than rules ordinarily allow, which is why etiquette pretends umbrellas are only about weather. You will be offered street advice. You didn't ask for directions, cautions, bargains, opinions on your bonnet ribbon by a flower seller convinced she knows which color wants your face. Accept or decline with warmth that does not invite familiarity. The line is finer than a glove seam and as strong as it needs to be. If someone presses, you bring the scene to an end without making a scene, which is the essential skill of living. In public, policemen dash newish in the century, blue-coated and helmeted proctored the peace. You speak to them in whole sentences. They reply in whole sentences. Both of you behave as if conversation is a civic ceremony. If you lose a reticule, you may report it. If you lose your way, you may be directed. If you lose your temper, you lose face. London forgives many things. Public theatrics are not among them. By the time you return home, your boots have learned the damp facts of the day, and your skirts have gathered an honest hem of city. Mary will brush it out with that brisk tenderness that feels like capable weather. You will feel larger on the inside than you did when you left, because cities enlarge the mind by handing it 1,000 unimportant decisions, all of which you made with a quiet spine. And if you are keeping score for yourself, you tipped a sweeper. You made room for a perambulator. You did not startle a horse. You returned a gentleman's salute with exactly the right ounce of acknowledgement, and you reached your door with your reputation riding beside you as calm as a coachman. That is what public manners are for, to arrive as the same person you set out as. The bell rings, the door opens, home takes your breath and gives it back. Asterisk, if the streets are the city's legs. The post is its pulse regular, quick and curiously intimate. You live in a London where the penny post, thank you. Rowland Hill means a note can cross town for the price of a single coin and arrive the same day sometimes, with time enough for an answer to arrive back before supper. It changes everything it means. Invitations are conversations. It means apologies can arrive fresh. It means a person may say more on 2 pages than they are permitted to say in 2 hours of supervised talk. Stationery is autobiography in disguise. Your paper is good but not boastful. Your monogram small in the corner, your edges clean. Mourning. Paper wears a black border thin for distant relatives, thicker for those who took a piece of your breath with them. Envelopes match. Sealing wax is not required for ordinary notes now, but a small seal remains a pleasure, a stamp of personality. Without drama, if the post is the city's pulse, handwriting is its EKG, loops that tell a reader something about your patience, pressure that suggests your mood, slants that betray your attempts at control on a day that refused it. You write with a steel nib that asks for discipline and gives it back as elegance. Ink bottles have their own gravity. You learn how not to tip them. A blotter saves you from your own urgency. You begin with the correct envelope salutation and echo it inside as if the paper were a drawing room that requires you to enter twice. My dear Mrs. Hartley, for intimacy of acquaintanceship. Dear Sir, when the subject is business, and the business is moderately stern, you end with the formula the relationship expects. Yours sincerely, for ordinary warmth. Yours very truly, for formal transactions. Yours affectionately, only where affection would not be. News. There are notes and there are letters. A note is a swift instrument, an RSVP, a thank you within 24 hours of a dinner, a line to say your mother is indisposed and sends her regrets. It is a duty done with grace. A letter is an errand of the heart or the mind, 3 pages that describe the light in a gallery, the way a singer's voice felt like a staircase, the progress of an invalid in a house where all sound is suddenly theology. A letter is a place to be sincere without being theatrical. You may write the truth here with more freedom than you may speak it, because writing is a room with fewer witnesses. Replies are timepieces, within a day for dinner invitations, within a few hours for urgent alterations of plans, within the week for matters that are not perishable. Telegraphs exist and are forgiven for their rudeness because they are used mostly for births, deaths, and emergencies, sharp sentences with no furniture in them. The post, by contrast, is domestic. It arrives at the front door, and a maid takes it on a tray the way she takes hot chocolate, something to be handled with care. It is distributed to rooms with a sense of occasion. Letters are opened with a knife that behaves like a gentleman, ever tearing, always easing. You keep a letter rack on a desk or hanging by a ribbon near a sunny chair. On it, invitations waiting for acceptance, recipes copied out by friends. In a hand that knows nutmeg, a pressed flower between 2 pages sent by someone whose garden you complimented too generously to be entirely safe. There is also a drawer where private letters sleep-dyed with ribbon if you are sentimental, arranged by date if you are practical. You do not leave letters where servants must pretend not to read them. You do not read other people's mail. The city runs on trust disguised as paper. When declining an invitation, you do it as if the evening in question were an excellent book you can't open yet. Regret is an art. It must be warm without guilt, specific without betrayal. A prior engagement is the velvet phrase that muffles detail without sounding like invention. You never blame illness that you do not have. You never blame servants who cannot answer back. If someone has wronged you, you do not put the wrong in ink that outlives tempers. You remember that posterity is nosy. Love letters exist in the polite suburbs of your world. They are rarely labeled as such. They are letters about books and weather and the moral improvement produced by Italian opera. They arrive with a respectable handwriting and no scent, and yet you recognize an undercurrent that is not present in correspondence about coal bills. A gentleman sends a book with a card that notes a passage he admires. He implies what he cannot yet declare. You reply with thanks that neither encourage nor freeze. The game is not coyness, it is safety. Words are safer on paper, but not safe enough to ignore the fact that other eyes may see them. Black-edged envelopes are storms that arrive even on fair mornings. You handle them before you open them, the way sailors look at a sky before they sail. The letter inside will tell you who must be written to, called upon, sent soup to, or left profoundly alone. Your reply will match their mourning, the color of your ribbon, the thickness of your silence in the room. The post knows grief by weight. Children learn to write notes early in homes like yours, thanks to aunts for books about Romans, thanks to godparents for a small coin, apologies for stepping on a lady's hem at a family dinner. I am very sorry I did so, and I will try to step only on floor. The point is not just practice. It is the formation of a reflex to acknowledge kindness, to write when words are owed, to treat paper as a bridge instead of a shield. There are practical things, too. Addresses written in a hand even a tired postman can love. Stamps placed straight, a small courtesy to the machinery. If your note concerns an event within 48 hours, you do not trust only the post. You send it by hand with a servant. who knows how to present a card and an apology at a door without turning the errand into news. When you are away from town, you forward your letters to the country with instructions for frequency. You do not allow replies to pile up like obligations in a corner. A tidy correspondence is a tidy mind, says your mother's voice, borrowed from a woman who tended letters all her life like a garden dot. Above all, you learn that letters and other people's are small moral acts. They can heal a misunderstanding that pride would prefer to keep. They can thank in words that don't stammer. They can allow a shy intelligence to shine. In a world that prizes composure, paper lets feeling exist at a humane temperature. You finish a letter, sand it if you still prefer sand to blotting, seal it, address it, and ring. The maid appears, takes the small rectangle as if it were both bread and news, and the house becomes a post office that believes in you. You watch from the window as the errand goes out into the street. Gloves, basket, the rhythm of a purpose. Somewhere across town, a whole table will receive your paper and become, for a moment, your voice. It is a quiet power, to travel without moving, to be present without arrival. And when a reply returns, as dusk turns the street gas lamps into halos, you experience one of the century's modern miracles, the feeling that the city listens. You slip a knife under the flap as if opening a gift you ordered from the day itself. The letter breathes air it was not written in. You read, you smile, you answer, and just like that, a long, polite friendship inches forward another inch, precisely as fast as it should. Asterisk, if the post is how feelings travel, courtship is how feelings behave. You are not alone with a gentleman, not really, not until vows and inside doors declare you may be. Until then, the world provides witnesses, and the witnesses provide safety. A mother in the next chair, an aunt with knitting that never quite advances, a friend whose laugh arrives a fraction of a second too late because she is listening as well as laughing. This is not mistrust. It is architecture. Beginnings look like happenstance. An introduction at a ball, properly made by someone who knows both your families. A set danced with a rhythm that doesn't pull or push. Conversation that likes the same kind of books and the same kind of weather. He does not compliment your looks. He compliments your judgment. You do not compliment his fortune. You compliment his discernment about a painting you both pretend you saw first. The point is not to sound clever, it is to sound compatible, which is a cleverness that doesn't draw attention to itself. A dance card is a document as binding as a treaty. Names and sets. A pencil stub. A small panic if the waltz line is empty when it shouldn't be. You write his name lightly enough that it can be altered if an ant intervenes, firmly enough to signal that intervention would be a pity. On the floor, your palms touch through gloves. The room is a galaxy of couples and candles. The orchestra remembers when to get louder. You talk about the music and mean other things. You float, you do not cling. If he guides well, it is information. If he apologizes automatically for a small misstep, it is more information. If he blames you, you quietly promote him to the rank of acquaintance. You do not need to collect dot between dancers. You sit where air can reach you and where eyes can find you without announcing. Chairs along the wall are 4 people on display. Chairs near a window are 4 people pretending they are not. Mothers drift, watch. Friends bring lemonade. Rescue. A gentleman asks permission to retrieve your shawl. He returns with it without interrogating its fabric because he knows that knowledge and display are cousins who shouldn't marry. He may ask, very softly, for a later set. You may grant it as if the idea were new to you when it is not. Gifts are a tightrope. Books are acceptable volumes of poetry with a line politely underlined, music with a page turned down like a hand, cupped to whisper. Flowers delivered to the house are acceptable if accompanied by a card addressed to your mother, with Mr. So-and-so's compliments. Jewelry is not acceptable. It implies a shoulder you haven't earned. If you keep the ribbon from a bouquet, you keep it in a drawer that knows secrets and never shows them uninvited. Calls proceed like clockwork, if clockwork had nerves. He leaves a card for your father first, because permission is masculine even, when interest is not. Your father receives him for 15 minutes that feel like an interview in a room that hires nobody. They talk about banking, or books, or the weather in Kent, and your father decides whether your family's furniture and future can stand this person's company. If the verdict is favorable, the next call includes you and your mother in a drawing room where the distance between chairs is a privately negotiated treaty. Walks are exercise and theatre. In the park, you proceed with your mother half a dozen steps behind and for decades ahead in experience. Conversation is mostly you and him, but its chaperone is more than a person, she is the public. You speak of the exhibition at the academy, the pianist who was tasteful but brave, the pamphlet you read on education. If the talk touches feeling, it does so through things. This painting is melancholy, not I am. This poem is kind, not I wish to be. And yet, meanings flow like water through stones, slow and relentless. Letters, if they happen at all before commitment, are reviewed by your mother, not because she is nosy, but because she is the engineer of your safety. He writes in a hand that behaves in the daylight. He speaks of his admiration for your mind. He never steals a word that belongs to vows. You reply in the same key. Two people can become known to one another within honest limits. Who you are when you are kind to a servant. Which books you reread. Whether you like the country for its quiet or forgive it for lacking the theatre. Courtship is the art of turning self into resume without leaving out soul. Rumors are managed by geometry. If you are seen too often with one gentleman, the street begins to conclude. You balance your dance card. You rotate conversation partners. You allow your mother to place you in a seating plan that is half chess and half mercy. Later, when the decision is made, people will say they knew all along. Earlier, they will say they never guessed. You cannot manage both. You manage neither. You behave well and let the city write your story in pencil. Proposals when they come arrive in 2 acts. Act 1, he asks your father for permission to address you. This is not theatre. It is the recognition that families are being asked to share doors and winters and credit. Act 2, he asks you, not for your obedience, for your consent. You are expected to be surprised. You are allowed to be honest. You say yes because you can imagine speaking that word to him again when the house is empty and the world has gone to bed. An engagement is a ceremony of new rules. Gloves may be peeled back. A little further hands may touch in the carriage for a moment that no one but the moon sees. Letters may use words like affection and esteem without consenting to the world's less careful synonyms. You meet his mother and learn the floor plan of her expectations. You learn that he leaves tea unfinished when letters come, that he watches over small children in drawing rooms with a gaze that is attentive without making them objects. He learns the sound you make when you are thinking and the ones you make when you are simply tired. He does not ask to erase your life. He asks to share it. There are settlements and announcements, rituals with paper that make a future possible, without requiring it to be a mystery. The banns may be called or a license obtained. The newspapers will print a line that feels larger than a line has any right to feel. People will send gifts that shine silver that thinks too highly of itself, crystal that behaves like ice but doesn't melt. You will write more letters than you imagined you had hands for, and yet, amid the ceremony and the supervision and the precision, there is the small, unsupervised freedom of knowing you have chosen as much as you have been chosen. It is not a modern kind of freedom, but it is real. You have looked at someone across rooms as various as dining rooms and music rooms and rooms crowded with people who were certain of their opinions and others who were certain of nothing, and you have seen the same person there each time. On the evening when the proposal is behind you and the future is ahead, you sit with your mother by a fire that behaves itself. She tells you the things mothers tell: be kind, be firm about household accounts, do not be cruel with silence. But she also tells you something rarer, that happiness will often feel like peace rather than fireworks, and that peace requires manners, the way a garden requires walls. You listen, you are grateful, you think of the ring on your finger and the letter on your desk and the walk in the park where the world felt both supervised and generous. You bank the fire, you sleep. The heart, properly chaperoned, is not restrained. It is protected enough to grow. Exhale. Let the laces in your imagination loosen a notch. Today is quieter than a dinner or a musicale, but no less exacting. You're going to the dressmaker, ordinary errand that, in this century, is part language lesson, part chess opening, because here, fashion isn't vanity, it's vocabulary. You will speak with fabric, announce with color, whisper with trim, and apologize if necessary with a ribbon. Mary lays your current wardrobe out as reference: day dress, walking dress, carriage cloak, evening gown, and a small mountain of things that never see daylight but build the public chemises, petticoats, corded and quilted, and the stays that convince your posture to agree with your future, the crinoline. Steel hoops, arranged like a tidy planetarium, rests against the wardrobe, a reminder that silhouettes can be architecture. You don't laugh at it today. You respect it for what it does. It keeps the skirt from clinging, the summer air moving, and the street dirt at a respectful distance from your hem. Season is a law no one needs to pass. Wool and merino in months that bite. Muslin, lawn, and lighter silks when London remembers the sun. Colours obey a calendar too. Autumn tolerates russets and bottle greens. Lent prefers restraint. Summer accepts white with a little sigh of relief. Your bonnet understands clouds and light better than most men in Parliament. Straw in June, felt when the wind takes liberties. Satin for evenings that promise stairs and candlelight. Gloves are punctuation marks. They keep sentences elegant. Pale kid for afternoon, dark for practical errands, longer for evening when sleeves confess a little shoulder. A lady of your standing doesn't wave an ungloved hand through public air unless necessity unbuttons etiquette. Shoes say more than ankles ever should. Leather, polished without boasting. Silk for evenings that begin on carpet and end on carpet. You never show the world how faithfully Mary brushes mud from the welt. You simply show up looking as though streets are always dry. Jewelry is modest grammar, pearls and small cameos for day. A brooch that knows how to hold a shawl without holding the conversation hostage. Jet for mourning will come to that. Garnets, if your mother allows it. Diamond drops only when evening invitations use generous italics. Hair is a thesis in smoothness sent apart. Coils, braids tucked into certainty. Pins vanish into the idea of composure. If a curl escapes at the temple, you pretend it planned to. Mourning dress is the strictest dialect of all, a sequence with fewer exceptions than Latin. When death touches your household, you don black crepe that seems to absorb not just light but comment. Deep mourning lasts months. Your bodice loses ornament, your sleeves lose flirtation. Your jewelry becomes aspiration rather than sparkle Whitby jet beads. Maybe a locket with hair woven so delicately it looks like a whisper. Later, half mourning acknowledges the world. Again, greys, mauves, and soft lavender enter like careful guests. You don't hurry the return of colour. You let it petition your heart. There is also the etiquette of not dressing, of tea gowns at home later in the century that take off a public edge, of wrappers and morning sacks that admit you are a person in progress before noon. Still, even privacy is groomed. Mary would never carry coals through your room if your hair were down and your sleeves rolled. She knocks with a sound that preserves dignity and detergent in equal measure. Men's fashion reads plainer, but it reads, your father's frock coat means business, his tailcoat means evening, his morning coat pretends daytime is noble sport. Shirt fronts are honesty, collars, discipline, cravats, the geometry of respect. A gentleman's hat is a headline top hat for city pride, bowler when he admits he must cross real streets. Boots shine, gloves fit, nothing squeaks. Thomas carries his umbrella like an argument he doesn't need to win. He changes his hat at the right door because doors, like ours, have preferences. You step out with a shopping list that is half supplies and half strategy. Thread, whalebone substitutes for stays, thank heaven for steel. New hooks and dies that do not betray you in drawing rooms. And a length of ribbon that will quietly update last season's bonnet. Your dressmaker, Madame V, greets you as if she's been rehearsing your silhouette in her sleep. She does not flatter bodies, she flatters outcomes. A sleeve, a hair narrower, she murmurs, tilting her head. A piping in the same cloth, to show restraint that is seen. You love her for the way she says seen. Fittings a choreography with pins. You stand while she and her assistant edit your outline. Fabric is draped, then persuaded into decision. The mirror doesn't lie, but it negotiates. You're not pursuing fantasy. You're pursuing proportion. Shoulders and skirt in conversation. Waist implied rather than suffered. Neckline that respects your years and your mother's nerves. Madame V approves a walking dress in deep burgundy wool with pebble weave that will read capable at the Royal Academy and correct at tea. A second day dress in sage green will treat your eyes as if they matter. For evening, a pale blue silk that makes a promise without writing it down. Trimming might be your favorite political act. Too much and you're showing off. Too little and you look as if you've given up. Welting along seems cess finished without shouting expensive. A narrow band of velvet at the hem whispers that you thought about dust and decided it wouldn't win. Soutache braid is elegant in fractions. Ruching is forgiven if it doesn't multiply like gossip. Then there is the invisible fashion, posture. Your governess once marched you around the nursery balancing a book on your head, not because a falling book is a sin, but because a raised chin is a shield. When you step into a room, your clothes get the first look and your posture gets the second, longer one. If you behave like a person the room has been expecting, the room often complies. Asterisk. As the fittings finish, talk turns practical. The blue will be ready Thursday, Madame says, pinning a chalk note to the pattern piece like a promise. The burgundy before the end of the week. and gloves you mustn't trust the old pair. The buttons look tired. She is right, buttons talk. They say whether you notice small things and small people. A missing button isn't scandal. It's shorthand for carelessness. You don't speak that language. Back home, a hat box arrives like a drum. Inside, the new bonnet straw under pale silk, the brim trained not to fight your cheekbones, ribbons. That tie without asserting waits for the occasion that will make it correct. Mary tries it aslant and square, finally choosing the slant that says composed rather than decorated. She sets it on its stand as if it deserves a nap. Evening brings an unplanned lesson. A black-edged card arrives. A neighbor has lost a father. Tomorrow you will send a note in quiet ink on quiet paper. If you call, you will go in half-mourning colors. If you see her by chance, you will let her speak first or not at all. You will not be brighter than the room requires. Fashion becomes kindness. And now here is the secret that makes the whole grammar worth speaking. Done well, it lets you stop thinking about yourself. Once you're properly dressed, you can devote your attention to music, ideas, a friend's shy joy, a stranger's tiredness, a child obsessed with the tassel on the parlor curtain. Clothing doesn't erase you. It releases you from worry, from sudden self-consciousness, from the feeling that you've brought the wrong face to the day. You set out tomorrow in the burgundy walking dress. The mirror nods at you. The street meets you halfway. Mary smiles, which is better than applause. And somewhere across town, Thomas will notice exactly nothing specific on lead, that when you step into the gallery, everyone behaves as if the room had been edited to suit you, and he will feel oddly grateful to a silk you will never meet again. Clothes did that. And then you did the rest. Asterisk, listen. A house like yours has 2 heartbeats. Above stairs, polished, quiet, arranged you hear the public rhythm of family and guests. Below stairs warm, brisk, practically you hear the engine. The bellboard in the servants' hall looks like a small, polite storm. Brass labels for dining room, drawing room, master's study, morning room, bedrooms 1 to 4. When someone presses a bell pull upstairs, a drop of metal dances. A number glows. Down here, that blink is not an interruption. It's the day continuing. The butler is the house's memory in human form. He holds the keys to the wine and 2 small social truths, who prefers a slice of lemon in water, whose voice carries when a door is not fully closed, which guest will try to overtip a footman the way one might overwater a rose. He stands at the front door like punctuation, turning arrivals into sentences and departures into period marks that feel satisfying. The housekeeper is gravity. Her keys jingle like a quiet sermon as she crosses the service passage, opening and closing the rooms of the day. She manages linens, sized and scented, soap soft and hard, candles rolled and dipped, and tempers, yours included, when illness and invitations collide. If the butler organizes the world facing out, the housekeeper organizes the one that faces in. The cook is the magician whose cauldron is a copper pot. She reads markets with her nose, seasons with her eyes, and sends up courses at a pace that keeps conversation warm without letting it boil. Her scullery medelbows red from the arithmetic of washing rinses, the city off plates, and polishes pans until you can check your hat in their shine. The kitchen maid minds the range. The stillroom maid minds syrups, jams, and remedies. A domestic pharmacy sweetened by fruit. Footmen are elegants on legs, chosen for height and for livery that flatters height. They learn the geography of trays and thresholds. They carry dishes as if dishes were plotting treason. They pour as if wine were listening. Their wages are not as handsome as their calves, but they are steady, augmented by veils, tips offered discreetly by guests who understand that gratitude, like wine, travels down and not only across. Housemaids are the mourning, fires, laid grates, emptied, rugs, beaten, dust coaxed into surrender. If your drawing room looks effortless by 10, it's because someone's muscles were eloquent at 6. Their courtesy is to be invisible. Yours is to notice anyway. A quiet thank you when you pass each other on the stairs is not conversation. It's a handshake between tiers of a life that must share the same roof without always sharing air. The lady's maid is a diplomat. She knows your hair better than your mirror does. She can unlace a dress with speed and gentleness that suggests both skill and loyalty. You confide practical things, this shoe pinches, that seem scratches. You do not confide your heart. She will carry the news of your household to the servants' hall because news is a currency, but a good lady's maid spends it with taste. Your brother's valet performs similar miracles on wool and leather and man's self-respect. He brushes, sponges, stitches, polishes. He keeps secrets that have nothing to do with scandal and everything to do with the fact that shirts are stubborn and boots lie. Valets and ladies' maids may marry each other if houses and fates approve. They will then manage a new, smaller engine somewhere else. Wages are awkward if you treat them like magic. They are the measured respect a house gives to the time that builds it. At Christmas, you add boxes, coins in envelopes, small gifts wrapped in the paper dignity can wear. On each servant's afternoon out, the house does not collapse, it adjusts. You do not schedule your emergencies to conflict with the scullery maid's once a fortnight freedom. You learn to tell the difference between need and habit, and you never confuse your comfort with someone else's life. Giving orders is an art of brevity without sharpness. Mary, the blue walking dress for 2 o'clock, with the narrower ribbon. And would you ask cook if a broth could be sent to Mrs. Hartley's maid? She is unwell. That's a sentence with 3 courtesies tucked inside. You do not raise your voice because downstairs walls are thin and tempers travel. You do not ring and then forget what you rang for. Bells or bridges, not toys. Privacy is the house's treaty. You do not open the door at the end of the passage that is clearly theirs. You do not stand in the servants' hall doorway like a general. If you must speak to the staff as a group, you do it in the kitchen with the housekeeper present and your tone wearing its best shoes. You let the household know when guests will crowd the week, when painters will arrive, when you will be away. Surprises are for Christmas and engagements. Everything else prefers notice. Illness redraws rules. If a housemaid's cough persists, you do not frighten her with silence. You ask the housekeeper to send her to the infirmary if needed. You see that a basin arrives at the right bedside. You let the cook know there will be an extra portion of soup called kindness. If your own head aches and the world tilts, you remember the sickroom etiquette for yourself. Short requests, stillness, gratitude, and no heroics with stares. Governesses live in a strange borderland gentlewomen who work. You include her at small family dinners. You do not make her a spectacle at grand soirees, where she would be neither guest nor servant. You invite her opinions on books with the same seriousness you reserve for your uncle's opinions on railways. Children learn manners by osmosis. They learn fairness because someone showed it to the person who tutors them. Discipline matters. Below stairs as much as above. A footman who speaks out of turn in the dining room learns from the butler. A housemaid who lets dust colonize a mantle learns from the housekeeper. You do not correct publicly what can be fixed privately. And if a servant leaves marriage, better wages. A mother's illness, you write them a reference that tells the truth in a tone that will be believed. You do not punish departure with faint praise. Sometimes, at odd hours, you will hear the house as itself. The pantry door hushes, the dumbwaiter sighs, a coal scuttle announces its weight. The cradle in the nursery clicks against the floor with a rhythm that even bachelors understand. Can feel like ships in a harbour, each ship with its own bell, its own captain, its own work. You are not the admiral, you are the weather reporter. You set days by kindness and predictability so that this small fleet reaches each evening intact. When guests say, "Everything here runs itself," you accept the compliment on behalf of the people who made it possible. Later, when the last dessert plate is stacked and the last joke retired, you pause at the top of the service stair and listen. Laughter rises smaller, freer, flavored with dialects the drawing room never hears. You don't step down, you step back. Each world deserves its own room to exhale. Mary appears with a candle. "Will you have me sit up, miss?" she asks, knowing you will say no. "Sleep," you say. "We've all done enough today," she smiles. The candle lifts small constellations in the stairwell brass. The house settles, one room at a time. Like a book closing its chapters, you bank the fire and feel grateful not just for comfort, but for the decent machine that made it. Above stairs, silence is the luxury you paid for. Below stairs, it is the luxury your staff earned. Asterisk, Victorian. Kindness has rules not because compassion is timid, but because experience is tired of chaos. You wake to a note from the vicar's wife. The parish relief committee meets at 2. The kitchen already smells of something good that will not be served to you. Cook is making extra broth for Mrs. Dwyer, next street over, who delivered twins last week and ran out of strength before she ran out of laundry. Your mother's writing box contains the city's moral ledgers, subscription lists, minutes of last month's meeting, a stack of small envelopes addressed to donors with surnames that sound like churches and banks. Your pen is not for signatures only, it is for decisions. Will the sewing circle supply 20 layettes by Will the district visitors deliver coal tickets before the frost becomes a sentence? Will your cousin's old cloaks become new warmth? The committee does not exist to feel good. It exists to make good something you can count and carry. District visiting is part arithmetic, part listening. You do not go alone. You go with a partner who knows the streets where a lady should not seem surprised to be. You carry a basket with care packages that don't patronize: bread, tea, candles, soap, baby clothes. If the house sounds like crying, you carry also a small book where you write what is true: names, ages, needs, not stories that will impress. The drawing room. You knock and wait long enough to let dignity arrive at the door. When it opens, you step into air that is different from yours, and you do not gasp. You ask permission with your eyes before your feet cross the threshold. Inside. Charity is quiet. You sit if invited. You stand if not. You look at the person who speaks to you, not at the paint that peels or the shoes that need replacing. If you can help on the spot, a coin, a nurse's visit, a note to the dispensary, you do so. If it must go to the committee rent arrears, an apprenticeship fee, a widow's allowance, you say when they may hope to hear. You do not promise what the meeting has not agreed to provide. Kindness that lies is just theatre. You learn the geometry of help. A sack of coal midwinter is immediate warmth. A mended roof is warmth that lasts. School fees paid for a term are warmth that might repeat itself in the next generation. Not every family wants your version of improvement. Not every applicant tells the truth. Not every truth is the one the vicar prefers to hear. You discover that mercy needs prudence as a chaperone, but you also discover that prudence can start to enjoy saying no. You keep them in balance deliberately. The ledger must sleep at night, and so must you. Charity bazaars appear like cheerful storms. The assembly rooms filled with stalls heaped with things that a certain class of woman can make beautifully with 10 evenings and a basket of remnants. Pincushions that resemble pastries. Baby caps with ruffles too gentle to be practical. Tecozis dressed like parsons. You and your friend's staff, a table with a strategic smile that says, "By this you do not absolutely need. You will absolutely feel better." Beneath the ribbons and the raffles, the work is real. Money collected becomes blankets and boots. Medicine and milk. You are careful with stories. In the drawing room, you do not turn people's poverty into entertainment or warnings told with raised eyebrows. You advocate without theatrics. Mrs. Dwyer will need help for a fortnight. The twins are well, but her strength is small. Not you should see where she lives. You praise resilience without baptizing suffering. Compassion here isn't sugar, it's bread. Education flickers at the edges of your week. Ragged school lessons on a Saturday, where small faces in large collars learn letters that might later become wages. You copy out vowels on slates and try not to love the children too particularly in case you cannot bear the ones who vanish. You learn that hunger cannot spell, and so you smuggle buns the way other girls smuggle novels. The master looks away and pretends biscuits are pedagogical instruments. Subscriptions are public names printed in newspapers. The amounts like little mirrors. Your family gives responsibly because reputation expects it and because conscience requires it. You discover, to your relief, that doing right for mixed reasons still gets coal to the hearth. Later, you will learn the joy of quiet donations with no initials attached. But for now, the city likes to see itself be good. Thomas arrives at one of the meetings. One afternoon with a crate of pamphlets and a face that says he has been arguing with a committee of men in another building. He is solicitous of your judgment without theatrics. Would the ladies consider reading this? He asks, and the way he says the ladies makes it sound less like a category and more like a cabinet. You take a pamphlet. You find the paragraph that would make sense to someone tired. You mark it. When he leaves, the room rearranges its opinion of him by a fraction toward respect. There is also the etiquette of refusing. Some requests are manipulations. With the ribbon still attached, a man with an invented injury, a petition for a cause that is actually a cousin's pocket, a school where no books have been in years. You are not stern in the way of those who enjoy sternness. You are firm in the way of those who enjoy results. We cannot assist in that way, you write, but if you will bring the boy to the schoolmaster Monday, we will see he receives a slate and primer. A path, not a coin, when a path is what is needed. Home again. You keep accounts. What was given, to whom, when you should look in again. The house ledger of generosity sits near the housekeeping book where eggs and soap are counted. Both are about the same thing, using resources to keep people alive and rooms warm. You feel, sometimes, like a clerk in a kind of bank whose deposits are trust and whose withdrawals are a little less cold. Charity also lives inside the house. A maid's mother falls ill. Mary asks for an afternoon. You say yes as if it were already assumed. A footman's shoes fail. The butler informs you with the minimum of drama. You nod and ordered a new pair without making a parable from it. Grace is best when it behaves like policy. At night, when the city's pulse slows, you realize how these small acts thread your days together. You are not rescuing London. London does not wish to be rescued by drawing rooms. You are practicing a steady decency that makes you stronger at the same time it helps someone else stand. It is not glamorous. It is not a story with a perfect ending. It is the kind of goodness that stacks like coal piece by piece, winter by winter, and becomes heat. You bank the fire. You fold the committee minutes away. You write 2 notes, one of thanks to a donor who gave more than they needed to, one of invitation to a woman who always arrives with hands that can mend and a laugh that never belittles. Tomorrow will have its errands, but tonight you let your mind rest on the weight of an empty basket that left the house full. In a world where so much is performance, usefulness feels like prayer. Let the room dim a little in your mind. Tonight isn't about great passions. It's about good evenings that behave themselves. In Victorian London, amusement is a ladder with many rungs, each with rules so clear you can climb them half-dash asleep. The theatre first. You arrive punctually, never during the overture, because being seen settling late into your box is a kind of boast the century distrusts. Your cloak is taken. Your bonnet's veil is arranged so it frames and does not hide. Hats. Ladies keep small ones that don't block lines. Men remove theirs. Opera glasses are acceptable, but not as binoculars for nearby scandal. You aim them stageward, not personward. Boxes are social. The stalls and pit are serious. If you sit in a box, you are half audience, half scenery. You nod to acquaintances across the horseshoe of balconies. You do not wave as if catching a friend on a ship. The stage gives you comedy that stays inside its lines, sentiment that does not attempt to pry your ribs apart, melodrama whose villains are obligingly obvious. When applause is due, you deliver it in measured, sincere layers, not the stampede. Modern crowds enjoy. Brava must be earned. Encores are a collective decision the room whispers itself into. The orchestra pit is its own etiquette. Between acts, musicians polish rather than perform. The tuning that sounds like a polite argument is allowed. Impromptu solos are not. If you bring a bouquet for a diva, your maid hands it to an usher, who delivers it with the correct neutrality. Handsome men do not throw flowers unless they wish to become a paragraph in a gossip column. Handsome restraint is the preferred arrangement. Across town, another night means a musicale music at home, that brave borderland between art and hospitality. The room wears candlelight and furniture arranged like listening. Programs are quietly ambitious, a lead that returns you gently to German fields you've never seen. A Mendelssohn song without words that lets a young lady seem brilliant without declaring it. A quartet movement that remembers to stop before the room aches for chairs with deeper cushions. If you are asked to perform, you never pretend you cannot. If you are not asked, you never volunteer. Compliments afterward are accurate but modest. What poise! How tastefully you shaped that phrase. You do not use the word genius on a weeknight. Card tables materialize after music the way moonlight appears on a sensible schedule whist, with partners decided by fate that look suspiciously like the hostess. Stakes are friendly, losses are forgettable, triumphs are folded away by bedtime. Tea revives, buns pacify, and conversation shifts to exhibitions. The weather that teased, then delivered, and the rumour that the Crystal Palace will once again house something more astonishing than a greenhouse's ghosts. Country house weekends are London's holidays with boots on. You arrive before noon the first day, so the housekeeper can place you in a room that behaves for your habits. Luggage is discreet. A gift for your hostess is not wine to businesslike, but something for the library table or morning room, a book of photographs, a useful paper knife, a basket of early fruit if your gardener is virtuous. The hostess orchestrates meals and mild adventures. No one works harder to make leisure seem inevitable. You thank her at every hinge of the day without making gratitude a hobby. After luncheon, the lawn becomes a map of simple conflicts. Archery in a corner where nobody can accidentally assassinate a gardener. Croquet in the middle, its hoops stern but fair. A path for walkers to argue pleasantly about clouds. Men may go out with guns at dawn in season. You praise the quality of the air and the breakfast afterward. For everyone, there are rides when horses are willing and chaperones can be convinced to enjoy the hedgerows more than conversation. Evenings help themselves to charades, 1 part wit, 2 parts bravery, 3 parts mercy. If someone guesses wrong, you do not correct with glee. You correct with thanks disguised as laughter. Rain requires a drawing room with games that don't demand more than rainy brains can provide. Jigsaw maps of counties, acrostics on scraps of paper that will later be found in a vase, and reading aloud from a novel that has the kind of morals one can applaud without blushing. You volunteer to read only if you can pronounce the French without summoning a ghost of Paris. The men pretend they mind being indoors. The women pretend they don't mind the men. Sleep happens in rooms dressed for it. Hot water in stoneware bottles. Fires banked to the murmur stage. A tray with a small glass of something that promises to be medicinal if asked. You thank the housemaid who put lavender where your dreams will find it. Morning returns with eggs that look as if the hens had a committee on punctuality. And then there's the seaside. The most respectable kind of rebellion the middle of the century can offer. Brighton or Margate, Ramsgate or Scarborough, each with a parade where you may walk and be part of the weather. Bathing machines roll like small houses down the beach. Women bathe at different hours than men. Modesty is enforced by schedule and fabric. You step into a wooden shelter, change under the supervision of a kindly tyrant called a dipper, and are guided into water that believes in briskness more than mercy. It steals your breath and then gives it back mint clean. You emerge pink and proud, as if you've negotiated a treaty with Neptune. On the esplanade, you promenade, parasols of friendly umbrellas. Music from a bandstand does its best military impression while you convalesce from London. Donkey rides are for children and the brave. You are not required to be either, but you admire those who are. Souvenir shops sell shells that never knew this coast. You buy them anyway, not for authenticity, but for memory. Postcards arrive later. In the century, but even before then, notes are sent from lodgings with windows that have decided to practice the art of framing. Pleasure gardens still breathe in the half-century's lungs. Vauxhalls, echoes, Cremana's lanterns. The respectable parts are very become. The less respectable parts require vigilant ants. You attend fireworks if invited, and stand where your dress cannot learn to glow. You admire the fountains. You do not admire the people who wish to be admired, except secretly, where approval won't go to their heads. The night ends early enough that morning does not take revenge. Circulating, libraries moodies, most of all our amusements, at an intellectual temperature that satisfies guardians and readers alike. You subscribe, and with your subscription, you borrow 3-volume novels that keep your evenings polite and vicarious. You are not prohibited from sensation. You are steered towards storylines where impropriety is educational and ends in marriage or repentance. You sigh at endings that feel like paperwork and write to a cousin about the chapters that remembered to be alive. Exhibitions are entertainment that calls itself improvement. You stand in front of paintings and practice stamina. You read labels as if they came with examinations. Sculpture tempts your hands. Your hands remain folded. You do not laugh at portraits that look like their subjects improved upon. The dead cannot defend their wardrobes. If the Royal Academy is too crowded, you forgive the crowd its enthusiasm. Art belongs to anyone willing to queue with dignity. Applause is timekeeping with palms. You learn the city's tempo. A modest ovation says, "We are grateful." A warm one says, "We tell our friends." A standing flourish is almost unthinkable. The Victorians rise for monarchs and mothers, not finales. You leave the theatre with the play still intact inside you, because you didn't trample it on your way out. Home at last. You realize a good evening worked, because everyone decided to make it work. Hosts who prepared, guests who restrained, artists who honored their craft, servants who ensured the invisible stayed that way. Entertainment, like etiquette, is the city's way of allowing strangers to share air. You bank the fire. You undress to the level where you can breathe like a person rather than a portrait. Sleep comes with the sound of applause still faint in your ears, the kind that says enough, not more, because enough is the most Victorian kind of satisfaction. Tomorrow, the city will ask you to be serious in a different way about illness, doctors, and the etiquette of keeping fear from running the household. For now, let the bandstand in your memory fade its last march into a lullaby. Asterisk. Illness visits, like impolite, whether rarely invited, never impressed. In a London that fears miasmas and loves advice, sickness comes with its own rulebook, written in smaller print than most can comfortably read. You wake one morning not to bells and bread, but to a throat like old velvet and a forehead that has mistaken itself for a kettle. You say nothing dramatic. You ring, Mary arrives. Your mother's voice reaches the door a moment later like a hand-first principle. Declare. Early, not heroically late. Victorians admire stoicism at funerals. At breakfast, it's a nuisance. Your mother decides, with prompt tenderness, no visitors. The fire's kept even, the bell rope laid within reach like a quiet promise. Mary opens the window an inch because air, not draughts, is the medicine she trusts. The grate is coaxed into civility. The room arranges itself around the bed. A small table for barley water and beef tea. A glass you are meant to sip rather than prove courage to. A vase with something green and scentless. The physician is sent for. Your father chooses one with a reputation for arriving when he says he will. He enters the sickroom hatless, gloved, composed, and dignified without theatre. He asks questions and waits for answers. He speaks to your mother as if she were the point, and to you as if you were the person. He prescribes with the kindness of someone who has seen 100 throats and still remembers there is a person attached. To each, tinctures appear pleasantly bitter, respectably brown alongside powders that dissolve in a glass if spoken to politely. Doses are measured in teaspoons your childhood knows. Timing is kept by the clock that has been telling your whole family who they are for years. Nurses exist as a profession. More every year, women who make order in rooms where fear lives. If one is engaged, she moves furniture with a competence that looks like magic. Bed angled to light. Chair drawn to where the patient's eyes fall most easily. Washstand stationed so it can be reached without traffic jams. The nurse is neither maid nor mother, she is purpose. You obey her without feeling obeyed. Visitors -o visitors. The etiquette is 5 minutes, unless you are family. 3, if the patient smiles, but the color of the smile is wrong. You bring what helps and what doesn't. Shout. Broth in a lidded jug. A little pot of orange jelly that believes in sunshine. Flowers that perfume nothing but eyesight. You do not bring gossip as medicine. It raises the pulse unnecessarily. You do not say, "You look better," unless the person looks better. You do say, "I will write to the committee for you," and you do it before you forget. Sickroom conversation is soft and short. You let the ill person begin. You do not require them to entertain you with their symptoms. You sit. You do not perch like a crow. You avoid sentences with the architecture of doom. No one is cheered by morbidity disguised as empathy. My aunt had your cough and kept it for months. Instead you say, "Mary will stay tonight. The house is quiet. We are not in a hurry," and the person believes you because you say it as if it has always been true. Infectious illnesses bring stricter rules. Scarlet fever shouts household quarantine in a voice even neighbors hear. Fresh air and carbolic smell like policin. Sheets are boiled. Doorknobs learn to shine in ways they never knew. The post arrives and departs in little quarantines of its own. Letters aired by open windows as if news might carry fever unless properly introduced to the breeze. You do not send a basket that might return disease as thanks. You send coins and notes and promises to run errands when the walls let the sick out again. When the crisis passes, convalescence arrives, often underestimated season. The patient looks well enough to pretend life is fully resumed. The body knows better. Visits lengthen slightly, but never become salons. Reading aloud is rationed like cake. You choose chapters that conclude rather than endokins for cheer, essays in small bites, poetry that minds itself. You do not impose Shakespeare unless the listener asks for him by name. You write notes on the patient's behalf to committees and friends. She is mending. Your kindness reached us. We will reply longer when strength allows. The city forgives late letters from rooms that smelled of eucalyptus and broth. If someone does not recover, the rules grow hushed and heavy. You have met mourning already in ribbons and hemlines, yet grief has social instructions beyond color. You do not hurry anyone out of sorrow's uniform. You call at intervals, determined by their closeness to the deceased, not your eagerness to be useful. When you visit, you do not re-narrate the last hours unless asked. The bereaved were there. You ask what is needed to decor, stamps, someone to answer notes, and you do that, not what sounds noble. At funerals, your face is your etiquette. Tears are not rude. The stage is . Medical accounts are settled without drama. You do not haggle with the man who sat up in your chair at 3 a.m. counting your breaths. You do not scold the chemist if the tincture stained your best spoon. You thank him for his readiness the second time you knocked that week. If a nurse has kept order in a house that wanted to fall apart, you find a way to say so with coins and a letter that will help her find her next post. Kind professions need money as much as praise. Illness happens downstairs, too. A housemaid turns pale at the syncodake fever. The housekeeper consults. You sanction the day in bed that wages rarely admit. Mary offers to sit up. You distract her with other tasks and hire a neighbor accustomed to night duties. The cook sends up broth because that is how she prays. The butler waits to be told which silver may travel to whom. Even plates must behave during illness. The household's classes blur for a week. Kindness climbs stairs without minding whether they were meant for service or family, and then, because bodies are astonishing, you wake one morning remembering what hunger is, and find the world has edges again. The room lifts from sickroom back to bedroom. The fire hums, the window opens wider. The gown you choose says, "Today is part of life again." You thank the nurse with a grip that admits how close you were to losing your pretense of bravery. You thank Mary with words that are fewer than gratitude should be, and somehow, exactly enough, you take your first walk. 5 minutes the first day. 7 the next, arm in arm with your mother, who sets a pace that agrees with your lungs. The city receives you kindly, as if it had been saving a patch of pavement for your return. The crossing sweeper salutes. You leave a coin. The wind decides to be decorous. Back home, beef tea tastes suddenly like food rather than duty. The piano is dusted. You touch it just to see end. Your hands remember entire songs live in them. The etiquette of illness, you realize, is simply good manners slowed down. It is patience, quiet, honesty, and precise offers. It is the refusal to make drama out of what already contains too much. It is the knowledge that bodies are houses that sometimes need painting, sometimes plumbing, sometimes nothing but absence of noise and the faith of people waiting outside the door. You sleep without a fever. For the first time in days, the city breathes, and you with it. Tomorrow, strong again, you will go to a dressmaker for final fittings, not only for a season but for a wedding. Rules will gather in garlands and contracts. Affection will be permitted nearer to its object. The sickroom taught you the best rule of all. Love is proved by small, repeated acts. Marriage will test and reward that truth. Asterisk. Sunlight the color of cream on porcelain. It is the morning you have been crossing streets toward for months. The house is awake early but moving carefully, like people in a church before the service begins. Your wedding dress sleeps on a screen. White silk and lace, an argument for hope that requires no words. Mary's hands have that ceremonial precision she saves for holidays and calamities. Today is the former, pretending it understands the latter. Your mother kisses your forehead the way she did before childhood fevers, then doesn't dare again, for fear of smudging something destiny is wearing. The ceremony itself, St. George's or St. James's. Choose the one that feels most like history, proceeds with a rightness that calms nerves rather than inflames them. You walk on your father's arm toward a future that is also a person. Thomas looks taller than yesterday, less because of height than steadiness. He says his vows like a man who has thought about every verb and likes them all. You say yours with a voice you recognize as your own, now speaking in the plural. A ring joins its older companion. A veil lifts. The city tilts slightly and then remembers how to be level. The breakfast that follows is not breakfast at all. It is lunch dressed for company. Speeches are short because sincerity makes better sentences when it isn't allowed to become literature. Gifts glitter in a side room silver that imagines a great many puddings in your future. Crystal that will learn your house is light. Cards with smaller sums of money tucked inside are quietly useful. You will buy napery with them, and remember, kindness every time linen behaves. Farewells are theatrical only for others. For you, they are decisive. You change into a traveling outfitter, walking dress that mixes dignity with seat cushion. Realism, make your exit in a carriage that knows which way the road is meant to go. If there's a honeymoon house in Kent, it is ready, beds warmed, windows polished, a kitchen that has practiced welcome in 5 courses. Your names feel strange together at first, like 2 notes not used to making a chord. By dusk they ring. Married life in town resumes with a new geography. You are now Mrs. The name sits neatly on you. The household is yours to conduct, not as a tyrant, but as a timekeeper. Allowance is discussed frankly, mercifully. Over a table, breakfast with eggs and a ledger. Thomas treats housekeeping money as civilization's engine and you as its best engineer. You accept the compliment and the arithmetic, rent, coal, candles, staff wages, tradesmen's bills, columns of necessity that add up to the shape of life. If you can save, you do, not to impress thrift, but to fund generosity unannounced. Morning brings the house round. You meet the housekeeper in the morning room, keys chiming like punctuation, a tour in soft shoes, pantry inventory, linen status, the silver that needs attention, the nursery that will someday be more than curtains and plan. You do not micromanage. You make principles plain and let experts be expert. We keep sponges separate, you say. We do not bully the scullery maid with pans no human should conquer. We pay the sweep on time, we never shout. The house understands faster than some people do. Afternoons are a braid of visiting, letters, and the sort of charitable meetings that now feel like purpose rather than duty. You sign as Mrs. on subscription lists and feel how that changes a committee's confidence in you. Thomas consults you on donations to the hospital and on which scholarships buy more future per pound. You wear colours, again the world has declared. You are loud and you choose them as if fabric could aspire to be character. Deep blues for competence, soft greens for rest days, pale shades for evenings that need gentleness more than display. Evenings together become the house's favourite. There are dinners, outright hand seats that congratulate without over-pleasing. Hostesses who watch you with the speculative affection of women assessing not just your dress but the weather you bring into rooms. There are dinners in where the butler learns your pace and the cook learns your relish for soups that taste of patience. When guests leave, you and Thomas perform the oldest postlude, the joint debrief, done kindly. You praise what was lovely. You forgive what was not. You write thank you notes that say more than delicious and less than marvelous. Because accuracy is its own charm. Privacy is civilized as much by consent as by locks. You and Thomas learn the architecture of each other's days. He asks which mornings you reserve for letters. You ask whether he prefers silence or conversation before business. He tells you when figures are obstinate. You tell him when a seamstress is ill and the sewing circle needs extra hands. Small notices prevent large resentments. When disagreement comes as it should in a house that contains 2 whole people, you practice the art Victorian marriage. Manuals rarely teach. Apologizing without spectacle, forgiving without doctrine, and laughing as a policy. Travel between town and country becomes your seasonal punctuation. In London, you are public, calls, concerts, dinners, mornings that begin with post and end with music. In Kent, you are particular, hedgerows that remember you, a kitchen garden that pretends to need your opinions. Walks where sentences lengthen until they are indistinguishable from silence. You learn to love both noise that flatters energy, quiet that repairs it. The staff becomes family in the way well-run houses intend. Mary, now your lady's maid, moves rooms with you as a planet follows its sun. The butler respects your unannounced rounds and your announced liberality. He knows you will not tolerate cruelty disguised as discipline. The cook establishes a code with you: 1 bell, for this is exquisite. 2 for please don't again. None for let's talk in the morning. You keep wages fair, holidays regular, references honest. At Christmas, the servants' hall sings. You listen from the doorway long enough to feel part of something, and not long enough to embarrass anyone. Children may come, they may not. If they do, a nursery will open like a book you've been saving, and a new etiquette will bloom nurses with knowledge, godparents with duties, christenings that try to keep blessings shorter than the baby's patience. If they do not, your life is still a page worth reading. Nisses who write for your counsel, schools that absorb your usefulness, causes that are grateful for your calm. Victorian happiness includes many shapes. You choose yours without requiring others to admire its geometry. Social storms occur. An acquaintance outruns propriety with a man who collects mistakes. A family you dine with fails a bank, and every face you know changes its expression at the news. Your rule in storms: do not be a wave. You offer quiet help where it will not sink the boat meals. Employment leads, a letter that introduces someone to a kind of future. You do not join the chorus that sings afterwards about who should have known. The city will be cruel without your voice. You and Thomas design small holidays. The British Museum on a weekday morning, when urns and mummies are attended chiefly by dust and a few undergraduates. Kew Gardens, when palms remember the tropics as if they had been born yesterday. A boat up the river to Richmond with sandwiches that voluntarily become crumbs for ducks. You learn you like each other best in weather that doesn't demand performance. He reads to you sometimes because the day was heavy for you. You play for him because figures are less stern when accompanied by something melodic. Health falters in a winter. It returns by spring. You observe your own rules as if you were visiting anyone else. He enforces them with kindness. The new physician is practical and not impressed by his own Latin. The nurse is a cathedral of competence. You recover. Gratitude becomes an extra chair you set at meals when no one can see it but both of you feel it. Years, not many, not few. The last, best etiquette: to let peace be interesting. Victorians are famed for rules that look like cages. You discover they can be trellises. Inside them, affection grows in directions that surprise you both. There is fun, yes, the real kind, the kind that starts as a spark at a ridiculous joke, and ends with both of you wiping your eyes over a slice of cake eaten in the kitchen because the dining room was too far away. There is dignity that refuses to ossify into stiffness. There are rituals that loosen gently with trust. One evening, much like many, you write at your desk while Thomas finishes a letter he will send before bed. The fire performs exactly the right amount of attention-seeking. On the mantel is a small photograph from the seaside, a machine bath silhouette, and a sky so bright you can hear the gulls in it. Below the photograph is a book of poems he gave you before vows were signatures, a page still underlined where music once reminded him of your hands. You close the blotter, he sands his name. The butler says goodnight in the register that tells you the whole house is safe. Mary sets a warming pan through the sheets and pretends not to notice that you thank her twice. You bank the fire, set the screen, and pause in the doorway the way people do who genuinely like the room they are about to leave. Thomas offers his arm as if it were the first week and not, miraculously, the continuing sentence of your life together. And as you go upstairs, you realize the series of days that brought you here, cards and calls, dinners and Sickrooms, dresses and ledgers, have done the most unfashionable, most precious thing. They have made an ordinary happiness, not the thunderclap kind, the hearth kind. Rules did not manufacture it. They merely shaped the space where you could build it without fear. You have learned when to bow and when to laugh, when to sit and when to speak, when to stand up and when to stay. Home, the city outside still clangs and hurries. Inside, the peace you practiced finally believes you. Blow out the lamp. London will keep its watch. Sleep at last, knowing that in a century famous for saying no, you found all the best ways to say yes, to kindness, to patience, to the quiet, hard-working joy of a life well-mannered and well-loved. Asterisk,